Hi again, everybody. Welcome into another edition. This is Cross Functionality, the show connecting coaching, baseball, softball, male, female, hosted by former college baseball and softball players. Thank you for joining us today. Episode 60. The title of today's episode, Decision-Making Fatigue. We'll be talking a lot about that, exploring 4 or 5 questions about decision-making fatigue today. So let me bring in my friend and co-host, softball national champion at the University of Alabama and current day renowned coach, Cassie Reilly-Boccia. Cass, how are you?
Doing well. We have 74. It's going to be 78 degrees today, which is...
I've heard about the weather in the Northeast being, the temperatures being higher in the 60s this week, late this week, 70s this weekend. So good for you. Congratulations. Nice breeze here in Florida.
It's the last hurrah before, it's coming.
Now, I hate to be the bearer of bad news.
Is coming.
I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but I hear there's a nor'easter heading your way.
There is. Yeah, I know. It's right. We get one more hoorah. We get one more nice sunny day.
I think it's a little early though for a nor'easter at this point.
It is. Farmer's Almanac though is predicting this to be a bad winter for the Northeast. Whatever that means. I don't follow weather that well, but that is what they're saying.
Well, just so you know, if it makes you feel any better, any consolation, when there's a bad Northeast storm or a mid-Atlantic Northeast snowstorm, we feel the effects here in Florida with the cold. It does get pretty cold, like down into like the high 40s. And that is cold for here, mind you, when the summers are 110 degrees. Also, I wanted to mention something else to you, but I forgot. Oh, what do you mean for Halloween? That's what it was.
I don't have a costume right now. I don't know yet. I'm still deciding, I guess.
Are you going trick-or-treating? I'm guessing you will.
Yes, with my 2 stepsons. Yes, well, they're right at the 6 and 4-year-old age, so that's prime trick-or-treating time.
Now, are you the type who's going to take their candy away from them when they go to sleep? No. I mean,
when they go to sleep, no, you can't have candy in a room with 2 boys. That'll be a recipe for disaster. But they can have candy at night. That's fine. So
when they go to sleep, I'm sure you're going to savage the bag a little bit.
I don't know. No, I think. They don't get too much, and they keep pretty good track of what they do get. They're excited about what they get.
No, you're too honest for your own good. Look at you. All right, so let's get into today's topic, episode 60. Happy Halloween, by the way, everybody, as this episode comes out Wednesday, November 1st.
Yeah.
November. I don't like how the World Series, though, is still going on at this point.
I did like it when it was in October, mostly, yeah.
Yeah. I mentioned this the other day to somebody. Somebody said, oh, enjoy the World Series, enjoy the whatever. And I said, yeah, it's almost over. Thank God. I mean, the season started back in late March and we're still talking about it.
Yeah. You know what? Hockey has another really long season.
It does.
They're starting now and they'll play till August or something like that. They have a crazy long season too. So
when I was a kid, and you remember this because we're in the same age bracket, but when we were kids, do you remember the NHL used to end before the NBA finals? Now it's flipped. And I don't know if that was because of COVID or whatever, but the NHL season is also very long too. So is the NBA season, but it doesn't feel as you don't play every day in those sports. But with baseball, it's just that slog, that grind, 162 games starting in March. And
not including playoffs.
Not including playoffs.
Right.
And the regular season is pretty much now devalued, as I've talked about. I was watching the World Series the other night, actually. They brought it up how the Diamondbacks had a really good first couple of months of the season. And I don't know what was like for you in softball. I'm getting, again, 52 games at the Division I level, right? Right around 52 games for...
Regular season, I think, was 58, 60.
Okay, 58.
68, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know where I got the number 52 from. But they were talking about how the Diamondbacks got off to this great start. And from, I think it was June 3rd on, they weren't playing very good baseball. And I just want to say that anybody out there who talks about, well, getting off to a slow start, not a big deal. It is a big deal because the Diamondbacks wouldn't be in the playoffs right now, right? If they didn't get off to that fast start. And that applies, I think, to obviously college softball, college baseball as well. You know, I don't understand. I don't like the whole slow start. When you go out there, you win, right? Regular season, it's time to. There should be more urgency there. Time to win.
Yeah, and listen, I never played as long of a season as Major League Baseball. I could see, I can understand why some people are like, oh, all right, we got to find our groove. I would much rather push really hard in the beginning to find that groove, and then not that you coast, but you start to really fine tune what works really, really well. And of course, like, because slumps are going to come. Your best hitters are going to come into slumps. People might get injured, whatever it may be. Like, why waste time banking on that everything is going to work its way out eventually? I agree with you. I much prefer the punch people in the teeth when they're trying to move slow, I guess, in the beginning.
Right. Okay, so we're talking today, decision-making fatigue, episode 60. We have 4 questions we're going to pose today. What is decision-making fatigue? How does this show up in young adults and student athletes? How do you, I'm not going to say we because I'm not a coach, but you as coaches or coaches out there, how do you recognize that? And what can you do about it, teaming up with the athlete, with the coach, to recognize this and to stop that decision-making fatigue? So let's first talk about episode 60 today. Thank you for joining us as always. We do appreciate that. New episodes every Wednesday, 9 a.m., Apple, Google, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, and on Softball Strength Academy YouTube page, you can watch the show as well. Let's talk about that first though. What is decision-making fatigue? We teased it a little bit last week, but what exactly is decision-making fatigue? How does it affect all athletes, all ages?
Sure. I think this is something everybody can relate to. It's not just an athlete that can relate to it, where you're essentially burnt. Someone asks you even like, hey, what do you want for dinner? You're like, I don't care. I just don't want to make a decision about it. It's like, I've had so many things to have to decide on today. And I think as we make more and more decisions, or as we're forced to make more and more decisions throughout our day, the quality of our decision gets lower and lower and lower. And actually this like particular phenomenon of decision-making fatigue is why they have you see politicians who are sometimes very smart, or people in like very high up roles, like big time CEOs, whatever it is. They're very smart. They're very organized, but then they make some bonehead mistake that gets them caught or gets them in trouble. And they're blaming decision-making fatigue on this, that they've had the quality of their decision-making is so low. So I think the busier that we see young athletes getting, the sooner that they're getting busy, the more AP classes they're taking, or the more technology and media that they get exposed to at their fingertips, or the more, whatever it is that we are just piling on humans, young student athletes included, all of a sudden we are just piling also on this decision-making fatigue that is happening in their life. And we start to kind of see that snowballing as to not leading to better performance all the time, if ever.
There's a good book out there that you mentioned, The Art of Decision-Making in Sports, right?
That's a blog. Sorry.
Or blog. Okay. Strategies for success. We touched on it last week about you 35,000 decisions that people make, approximately 35,000 decisions a day. You wouldn't think that's the case, but we kind of explored it last week towards the end of episode 59. And yeah, there are a lot of decisions that you make, small decisions that you don't even know that you actually are making. You do it almost subconsciously. But with athletes, it's the same thing. Those smaller decisions, though, it's the same, but there's differences. The smaller decisions that you may make will lead to bigger consequences, or to lead to certain things. For example, what time you wake up in the morning, your morning routine, what you do, those little decisions that get you ready for a game. Those little decisions could lead either to a good game, a bad game, being mentally ready or being physically ready, or not.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think too, like, something that we have to consider is that the reason why this has become such a topic in coaching conversations, or even business conversations, is because the number of decisions we're apparently making in a day is going up and up and up and up and up. I think the reason decision-making fatigue is becoming such a hot topic over young athletes in business, when we see it coming up in sports, is because that 35,000 number has apparently had this steady increase throughout the years as technology has gone up, as all these things have compiled on top of athletes. So the other thing too is like the weight of the decisions is so much more. It's, whether or not I'm deciding to pick up a water and drink it is very different than when I go to post something on social media, or go to like or comment. The ramification of doing something that all of a sudden, if they wanted to, everybody in the world could have access to, is tremendous. And I look at some of our baseball guys, and they sign up for a PBR event, and they're getting their rankings. Every single swing they take, every pitch they throw is posted on the internet for all these scouts and college coaches to see. And so these decisions are now no longer light decisions. They're heavy decisions. And I think that's part of the reason why it is just weighing so much more on athletes. And the blog post you mentioned, the quote that came from it was, decision-making fatigue can lead to reduced attention control and cognitive processing, making it more difficult for athletes to accurately perceive and interpret game situations. So additionally, this fatigue can impact the athlete's emotional state, leading to increased anxiety or frustration, which can negatively impact that decision-making. So I mean, we've certainly seen this in young athletes, an increase in burnout and an increase in not enjoying the sport. And is this, this might not be the sole reason, but is this a huge part of the reason why this is happening?
So you alluded to it there. Let's go on to the next question. How does it now show up in young, and from your experience, how does it show up in young athletes and, student athletes, older athletes? It doesn't, I don't think the age really matters here, but how does it show up just in general, from what you've seen in athletes?
Sure. It's almost like this, you definitely see that burnt out athlete. I think it's very easy to maybe recognize a burnt out adult, just because usually burnout comes from like your profession or just like the stresses of life. You don't normally think, oh, I'm going to see a kid burnt out, but when you do, you start to see it's like a very lackluster focus. They're kind of just there to check a box. They're just showing up. They're not actually there. And because it is at that point, they're too emotionally, mentally, and physically at that point exhausted to actually show up and be present and be all in what they're doing, because they've exhausted that in other areas of their life already before they came to that training or that game that they're at right now that you're seeing them at.
Did you ever have decision-making fatigue as an athlete? I think that's first we have to answer that question.
You know what? I probably did, but didn't recognize it or didn't even know what was going on. And it was certainly, I think it showed up as not trusting myself at all. Like, maybe it can be decision-making fatigue. If you take a deeper dive, you could really argue that it's relative, right? Like, I would deep dive on the swing. I would overanalyze my swing at some points. I would stress out about, X, Y, and Z. And now I've watched countless hours of video and looked at this one thing. And I think in my head, I'm like, oh, I'm preparing, but really I'm obsessing and I'm depleting my mental energy and emotional energy as it pertains to the swing. And then I get up to the plate and I'm like, like I don't trust anything about my swing anymore. And it's really, maybe I'm taking BP just to take BP, and I'm not actually allowing myself to just have my athleticism show through. I'm instead second guessing every little thing, and I have no capacity to actually just make high quality decisions at the plate anymore.
Yeah. So really what you're kind of alluding to, when you're overthinking, as a hitter, that's kind of like decision-making fatigue in a way.
For sure, yeah. And so, right, you could have decision-making stress, I guess, surrounding you as a hitter, and it'll certainly affect you as a hitter. Then I bet you when you try to go out to dinner that night and someone's having a conversation with you, you're gonna be like, you're just not gonna be there either. That stress is gonna start to affect all areas of your life.
I don't know about you, but when I used to go to the beach, I used to practice my hitting, or I used to practice some certain things about the swing. I don't know, did you ever do that? Maybe not at the beach, but maybe not so much.
Different settings.
Yeah, maybe different settings.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can see that.
That's so that's that's where the stress comes in too. Or you're just constantly overthinking. So yeah, I can definitely relate to that. Boy, I used to do it, but I used to do it a lot at the beach. Right after in August time, when the summer season would come to an end. Right around that time.
There you go.
I would go to we would go to the beach, and I would just constantly be thinking about my swing.
So I would ready that it just came to me. I would I'd be watching baseball in the basement with my parents, and I couldn't just enjoy the game. I was hyper obsessing over the swing and then how that affect my swing. And sure enough, I was standing up working on something while I'm watching a game instead of just sitting watching the game. So yeah, I could see that.
I used to watch games just to watch my favorite hitters and how they would hit and what their approaches. Okay. So as a coach now, let's move on here. Decision-making fatigue. It's our topic today, episode 60. How do you recognize it in an athlete? We just talked about how it shows up, obviously physical, mental, emotional, but how do you recognize that? Because athletes, they really aren't as forthcoming. I'm guessing body language cues, right? But how do you, as a coach and other coaches out there, how could they go about recognizing that decision-making fatigue that athletes might be suffering from?
Sure. I think of it, I actually think I see it a lot more in training. Granted, I work with an athlete way more in training than I ever do on a competitive field. So this might just be my personal lens of bias that I'm viewing an athlete from. But I start to see the athlete, they show up and they're like, okay, I'm here. I made it. Just tell me what to do. I don't want to think. Like, don't, we did something in the weight room one time where we would have an athlete say, okay, listen, you have squat today, but you get to pick what squat you want to do. And they would stress about it. They'd be like, what do you mean I have to pick if it's front or back? Because in our head, we were testing out, what an athlete is going to pick what they're strongest at, and that might be the best squat for them to do. Anyway, that's just an example of an athlete just not wanting to take ownership or not seeking autonomy over their training. Granted, some people are a little afraid of it, and that's a different, path you're going down. Some people just do not feel capable of taking ownership of their training. And what happens is they become a very passive, or really just a passenger in their athletic career, in their development. Instead of being in the driver's seat or wanting to be in the driver's seat, they're just along for the ride. And so everything's kind of just a checklist for them. I did this because I was told to do this. And then, later down the line, when they don't do well in the field, again, that leads to not having ownership. It's not a good place to be in. I'll start to see that burnout of athletes just not having that willpower to train anymore. It's that willpower to push through difficult drills. And unfortunately, after maybe you recognize it here and there, in October, but come December, January, you're starting to see a very clear difference in how much the athlete is progressing. And you have this athlete come in and says, well, I've done everything you've told me to do. Why am I not getting better? And it's because they have no idea what the intent behind what they're doing. They don't care to know the why. Like I said, they're so burnt from whatever else that they got going on in their life that they kind of just show up and say, yeah, I'm here. I'm checking a box. And you'll only see very small gains from that, opposed to leaps and bounds that some other athletes will take.
I'm glad you made that comparison, though, with the weight room. By the way, front squat or back squat, which one do you choose?
I'm a front squatter.
Front squat.
I am.
You have good wrist mobility, I'm guessing.
I do. I have fun facts. I competed in Olympic lifting for like 3 years after I got done with my grad degree.
Okay.
So,
all right. How much can you front squat?
Let's see. My back squat at my best got up to like 325. My front squat was only ever at 280. So it wasn't.
Yeah, front squat is very hard. Front squat is very hard. Now when you were I'm just curious. When you were powerlifting.
Big lifting. So it was clean and jerk and snatch. Yeah,
right.
Yeah, I never did
this. You're right. No, thank you. I'm glad you corrected me, because there is a big difference there. I was going to ask about what your clean and jerk and what your what else? Thinking here, hang pull.
It was just snatch. Yeah. So like all of that is components of it. That was the like Olympic lifting is very sequencing based and movement based, and you could be really, really strong but not possess the right sequencing. So very similar to hitting. And I think that's probably why I liked it.
Yes. So I'll tell you what, the power clean is very, very, very hard, as you know. The audience may not know. It's very, very hard. A lot of sequencing. You could again, you mentioned that you could be strong, but you could be really off sequence and not do very well. Mm-hmm. So what was your highest snatch?
I think I hit 160 one time, and that was like a little bit above body weight for me. And then my clean was at 200, but I could never get my jerk above 185. So those were solid for me. I had always thought, I was like, maybe I'll try to get 200 clean and jerk and 185 snatch, but I would have had to like really, really block it. And I'll tell you what, my body hurt. That was not, I felt strong, but my body, I would wake up, I'm like, dang, this doesn't feel good.
So that 325 is very impressive, by the way. A lot of guys cannot do that. I'm sure we can get into your weightlifting career some other time, but My point was, when you're making, if you're making up your own workout and you're not getting it from someone online, or if you're getting like a blueprint, say, or a skeleton type workout that you can just kind of fill in, create your own adventure, right? There's a lot of decisions there. I've experienced it too, believe it or not, but there's a lot of decisions there that go into what exercises you want to choose and the exercise selection in general. And when it comes down to front squat or back squat, sometimes it's as simple as they're both accomplishing the same thing. It's just kind of in a different movement, a little bit of a different movement, and just a different way you set up. And that translates to obviously baseball and softball. That sometimes you don't even know that you're fatigued from the decisions you're trying to make because you're overthinking it so much.
For sure. And you know what? I think this will probably lead into what we could potentially do about it. But I think we all intuitively know that when we are disorganized in our life, it is going to lead to us not being as productive in other areas of our life. The most obvious example is if we slept through our alarm and woke up and we're like, oh my gosh, and grabbed everything and ran out the door, we're not having as productive of a day as we would have had if we woke up at the time we wanted to. So just how we structure our entire day, how we structure our life, how we structure just our internal organization, our internal productivity, it's going to lead to just such a better outcome for everything else that we do in our life.
Yeah, I like the idea of structuring, and that's something we can talk about now with, what can coaches do about it? Aiding athletes. And the big thing here that you wrote down in the notes, which I actually underlined as well for my own personal notes here, creating those healthy habits and the keyword routines. Having a routine.
Yes. You know what? I think we don't realize too, like if you the night before, if you pick out what you're going to wear, if you pick out what you're going to eat for breakfast the next day, you decide on certain things, and maybe you just write down a brief, like, okay, I'm going to do this for the first 10 minutes of my day, whatever it may be. You take 10 minutes to set up your nighttime routine for your next day. You'll go through the first 30 minutes of your day and barely have to make a decision because you've already made those decisions the night before. You're setting up this routine for yourself. And what routines help with is when we're highly, highly motivated and we are like, yes, I'm going to start training, I'm going to do this, we don't feel like we need that routine as much. We've talked about this before. When we need the routine is when we start to drag or other things pile on. Boom, I have my routine. I get through the first 30, 45 minutes of my day and I feel very accomplished and I haven't wasted any of my, I guess, mental stores on trying to make a decision of, well, what am I going to wear? I want to wear this. Where are those pants? They're upstairs. I think they're upstairs. Are they even washed? It's like it leads to so many different things. So when we can set up these little mini routines throughout our day, I'm not saying we have to be a robot, but when we can start to take care of certain decisions by our habits and our routines, all of a sudden we feel a lot more present in what we're doing and we don't feel as burnt out or fatigued. I mean, gosh, as a student athlete, getting work done in advance and not waiting till the last minute to do things, staying ahead of all those aspects is huge. And the lack of stress that you feel from not having those areas in place will then all of a sudden help you become the best decision maker when it comes to being at the plate, to being really confident when you're at practice. It'll start to bleed into those other areas of your life.
You talked about it last week with what your routine was and how that helped you get prepared for games. And yeah, I think it's so important. Athletes don't understand the younger athletes, and I didn't either. So I'm guilty of it too. I don't want to sound like a hypocrite here because I'm certainly guilty, or I was certainly guilty of it. But having a pretty flexible routine, creating that flexible routine, how do athletes go about creating that flexible routine that could really help them with the decision-making process just in general in their athletic careers?
Yeah. And, listen, I talk to some athletes and they're like, listen, I've tried that and it doesn't work for me. And what they're probably saying is it was really hard. I tried this one method and it was way more effort than I thought it was going to be. I think what that athlete is really telling me is they just haven't found out the best method for them to work. Because obviously if we nail down some type of organizational or journaling habit or something for them, they're going to come back and be like, okay, I get it now. I get how much more freedom this has allowed me in other areas of my life. So I've always said having some type of organizational schedule and journaling, they accomplish the same thing. And that's they're taking something out of your brain that is now spinning and cycling in your brain, and they put it on paper for you. So you don't have to bring that weight with you everywhere. It exists somewhere else besides your brain. So whether that is you're staying organized with your schedule on your computer, or your phone, or it's something physical that you carry around with you, but just having some type of schedule where you can see what am I in control of today, what's happening today, and what does my outlook look for the next weeks or months. And again, student, athlete, someone who has schoolwork on top of their training, like it's imperative for them to be on top of what their expectations are as a student first before their athletic endeavors come next. So I think having some type of organizational system that works for them, and again, what works for one athlete is not the same for the other, and then some type of journaling technique, which we've discussed in length, will be so helpful for them to just journal, okay, I'm stressing out about this, or this is how I'm feeling. They'll be able to look and be like, wait a second, why am I stressing about this? I can take care of this in my nighttime routine. Or why am I stressing about this? I can go to my coach and talk about this. And what we're trying to do is take those heavy decisions that are depleting their decision-making fatigue, let's say, or their ability to make high-quality decisions, and we're offloading it onto paper so that they can reflect on it a little bit easier. So I know it's a mouthful, but I think those are two huge areas that people can work on there.
So do we hit on everything today? Episode 60, decision-making? I just want to make sure.
So. Yeah, it's something you don't hear about as often. It's also not the end all be all. I think that's something else. Like someone might be burnt out, and it doesn't mean that they have decision-making fatigue. It could be just an aspect of what they are experiencing is all.
Yeah. All right. Well, next week, be sure to follow us too on social media at Jim Tara, at Coach Cassie RB on Twitter, at Coach Cassie _RB on Instagram. Next week, episode 61, strategies for playing your best when it matters the most. There are certain players out there, I won't name who, coming from baseball side. I'm sure you have some in mind for softball, but coming from the baseball side, there are certain players out there that perform the best when the lights are the absolute brightest. And there are some players out there, some stars at the major league level that I see that can't perform when the lights are at the brightest. I won't name who they are. It's not important. But there are certain athletes out there.
Nope.
And there really is, yes. And yeah. So we'll talk next week, strategies for playing your best when it matters the most, episode 61. You got anything before we get on out of here?
No, just happy Halloween and happy almost off season. I think softball, fall ball is like just about wrapping up. So.
Yeah.
The almost off season to everybody.
And you're busy at the academy, I'm guessing. You're not there today.
No, not there today, but we're ramping up, which is nice to see. It's exciting to see people getting done with their fall training and getting done with their fall sports and starting to come back into the building.
When was the last time you hit personally?
Like off of a tee or like off of
just like whatever tee,
Well, I don't know if we've mentioned on the podcast, but I am now almost 8 months pregnant, so I have not hit myself. I have a belly in the way that is not allowing me to hit like I used to. But
might affect your torque.
It just I'm just being cognizant of my back. But when I filmed for the drill library, I was in the cage almost like every other day filming different drills, and that was fun. I felt like my swing was really getting intact for that. So that was a few months ago, and then anytime we're in Alabama, we'll find time to hit on the field. So, but every now and then, sometimes I just need a 5-minute break from work, and I'm not pregnant. I'll go in the cages and just swing a little bit.
I'm thinking you should get in the cages probably next summer. Film yourself hitting. Maybe we can do like a hitting breakdown of yourself.
There you go.
I'll be good. I'll just step out of the way and let you break your own swing down.
Yeah, this is what it looks like at 30. I'll be 34 then, so 34 years old, and this is what it looked like at 22, my senior year in college.
Yeah,
things I wish I would have done with my swing my senior year in college, maybe.
Right. I'm gonna hit soon. I'm gonna hit very soon as well, and
Nice.
I always film it, and I always break it down, and then after just. After watching so much, I can't watch it anymore. So I'm so kind of disgusted. Anyway, okay. So next week, episode 61, strategies for playing your best when it matters the most. Thank you for listening and subscribing and watching. We do appreciate that. And we'll talk to you next week.